Alright, so today I'm going to show you how to replace the starter in a 2002 to 2006 Nissan Altima, the 2.5. And the reason I'm replacing the starter is because when I went to start the car, well, now it's starting, but usually it just click. It starts right up now, but right when I start filming, it starts right up, but usually it just click. Look, now it's starting. But I already know it's a bad starter because every time I would go to start the vehicle, it would just make a clicking sound, a single click, and then I had to keep trying to crank it over and over again, and eventually it would start. So we're going to replace the starter, and if it's not that, then it might be a relay. But I'm pretty confident it's the starter because the starter is very old. It's been in there, I don't know since when, but I'm going to show you how to replace it. Let's try this again. Oh, come on, now it's starting. Alright, let's replace that starter. Alright, so here's the starter I'll be using. I got it off a junkyard for 25 bucks, and it looks like it was recently replaced on that one Altima I took off. Just by looking at it, it's very shiny and it looks new. So I got a great starter. So the starter is located right next to the transmission over here. You see that? This is the starter. And to remove that, there's two bolts holding it in. Just by looking at the old one, there's 1, 2, and then there's 2 connectors we have to remove, and the starter should come off. But before we remove it, we're going to work our way in, so that way we can get it out easy. So by working our way in is by I have to remove some hoses at least, or try to. I'm going to remove this intake here, the air intake filter, the whole tubings, so that way we get easier access to remove that starter. So I got the little intake off. We have a little bit more room now, but before we start working on the starter, we're gonna have to disconnect the battery so that way we have no power to the starter at all. Because if you accidentally touch the positive wire to the little starter, it might crank. So you got to be careful with that. If you're gonna take off the battery, I really do recommend you taking off the battery, or at least disconnecting it, so that way the starter doesn't do anything. So I got the battery disconnected. As you can see, there's no more terminals. There's no more post to the terminals right here. So now we're going to go ahead and try to remove the starter. So as you can see, right there is bolt number 1. On the other side should be bolt number 2. So to remove the starter, what I'm going to do is we got to start by taking off this little harness here. So let me try to remove it with my hand. It's a little bit hard, but yeah, I'm going to need something else to remove that harness, but we should be able to get it off. And then we're going to have to move this boot out the way to get access to that nut, which I believe it's a 12. And then we can just take the harness off. And for the bolts, those are 17s. That bolt is a 17 as well as the other one. So we can replace the starter. So that little nut right there is not a 12, it's actually a 13. So I got my 13 socket wrench. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to remove that nut. There we go. Now that we got it loose, we can go ahead and just get it off the rest of the way with our fingers. It's the little boot that's causing it to come back. So try to remove that boot further back as you can. And that'll give you more access to remove the little nut. Just like that. We got that 13 nut off, and now we can pull the little wiring aside. Alright, so this wiring is a little difficult to remove, but with a little bit of maneuvering back and forth, we should be able to remove it. If not, then you're going to use a flat blade screwdriver and try to remove it, which is what I'm going to try to do right now. So I got a flat blade right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back here and carefully wiggle it off. Let's see. Excuse a little camera angle just because I'm trying to. There we go. So we got that little connection off. Set that aside. We'll set that behind the wiring harness right there. And now we can go ahead and try to remove that little connector. So I got the harness disconnected, and to remove the harness, you can see this right here, you got to push that down. you push this piece right here down, and then that takes the harness off. So now we got the harness off, we're able to take out those 2 bolts. So once again, there's one up there, that's a 17, and then there should be one back there. And there's one on the other side here. It's a little difficult to get, but I'll show you how to get it with the long extension. But we're gonna try to remove this top one first, and then we'll do the next one. So getting to this back bolt right here can be a little tricky. So this little cable right here would go inside here. So all you do is pull it up, pull it out, and then we put it up here. Now this little wire loom here, you can see it had a little clip, and that clips in right there in that little hole. So unclip it, move it up to the top, and that gives you more access to remove the bolt for the top. So getting that bolt out is quite tricky. So I have a little trick, especially since it's a tight area. We're going to be using a bar. And let me just get the ratchet. There we go. Slip the bar on top of the ratchet. And then try to break it free like this. Dang. That's in there good. Alright, let's see if I got it loosened up, because it kind of feels like it loosened up a bit. Nope, that's still in there good. Let me try something else. So I got the top bolt off finally, after removing a bunch of stuff. Well, not removing, but after fighting for this bolt, it finally came off. And that was a 17. So for the bottom one, which should be down there, it's like under here, but way back there. It's not a 17. I just figured it out. It's actually, I don't know, I think it's a 15. So I'll let y'all know what it is in a second. So I just found out what side it is. It's a 14 or a 9/16. So I'm gonna be using a 9/16 to remove that last bolt. Alright, so I got both bolts out. This was the long 17, the one that was very tough to get because it was so tight. This one fairly came off easily. It's a 14 millimeter. It really came off that easy. I didn't require that much strength, but it's out. So now that we got the bolts out, it can come back here and wiggle the starter, and it should come out just easily. Just like this. And just like that, the starter is out. So we got the starter out. And look at that. Compared to the new one. So let's go ahead and get the new one back in. Now there's one thing you should do before you install the new starter. So as you can see, this little bracket here, this is for the cable right here. This cable. So that bracket, we need to transfer it to the new one, so that way it goes in properly. And there are 2 10s. So I'm gonna try to remove these. Just remove those 2 10s, transfer the bracket, get it on, and then you can get the starter on. So now the bracket's on, we can get the new one installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to wiggle it back inside. Let's see. Okay. That's a little hard doing it in one hand, but I should be able to do it. There we go. Now we just gotta make sure it's lined up. And once it's lined up, we can go ahead and get it bolted up. So remember, the long bolt goes in here. Let's see. Just like that. I'm gonna go ahead and get it tightened down, and then we'll do the 14. So that's the first one. Alright, so we got both bolts in, as you can see. That's the first one, and the bottom one's tightened down too. So we just gotta get this tightened down, torqued down, and then get the connectors on, and then we should be done. Just get everything back together and we'll be done. Alright, so it's now torqued down. It's not going anywhere. Last thing to do is to get the connector on. Remember, we put it back here so that way it wouldn't move. So let's get it back. Let's see. There it is. It's a little hard to do it one-handed, like I said, but this should fairly go on easily if we do it correctly. Yeah, I might need to do this off camera, but you get the point. Just get this little connector in and then get it, the nut, tighten it down, and then you can plug in the connector, the harness, and then you're done. Put everything back together and start the car up. Alright, I'm done installing it. I got the little terminal connected. As you can see, it's now in. And I also got the little harness connected as well. So let me just go ahead and get this covered back up. There we go. Now I can go ahead and get the intake back in, put the battery back on, and see if it runs. So my intake is fairly easy to put back on. All I do is make sure the hose goes in the throttle body, just like that. And then this hose wants to go inside that hose. Good. Let's see. And then I'll tighten down the hose clamp so that way everything is secured. Let me just get the ratchet. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this down, reconnect the battery, and we'll start her up. Battery's connected, intake is installed. One last thing to do is to make sure we get this harness back to the way it was. So this, like I was talking about, just goes in like this. Just like that. It goes in like that, and we're done. Let's start her up and see if it runs. Moment of truth. Is it gonna start? Perfect. And just like that, that's how you replace a starter in a 2002 to 2006 Nissan Altima with the 2.5 liter. It's that easy. Real quickly before I end the video, I just want to explain why a starter goes bad. So the reason why a starter might go bad is because you either have a bad battery connection, which means the starter won't engage. You either have a bad fuse or a blown fuse, or a bad starter relay. So I'd recommend checking the fuses first. If that's your problem, then you don't have to replace the starter. But if your fuse and your relay are good, then it's most likely the starter. In my case, it was the starter, because every time I would go to crank it, it would just click. I'll put a clip here in a second. So that is how you replace a starter in a 2004 Nissan Altima. That's my year of my car. But yeah, if you found the video helpful, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Next time, we're going to be replacing the door handle on this side.